This episode will be looking at a spooky classic and Halloween favourite for many, Castlevania. But what some people may not know is that Castlevania was actually released in arcades before it came to NES, and thanks to a place called Retro USB, I have a reproduction cartridge of Versus Castlevania which I can play at home. Versus Castlevania appeared in arcades in 1987 alongside 3 other Konami games, Gradius, Top Gun and The Goonies. These all released on NES later that year. This was seen as a good way to advertise new games, as people might get hooked on the coin-op version before being offered it at home. The Versus Nintendo system was a unit specifically designed to showcase NES games in this way, and over 40 titles were released for it, although there are some differences in the hardware. As you would expect, Versus format games usually focused on multiplayer, and game difficulty was increased. The colour palette of the Versus system also differed to NES, and some games featured more complex animation than seen at home. Versus Castlevania is certainly a more difficult version, although despite the name it doesn't actually have a multiplayer mode. Before we get into the game, let me just point out the bizarre movement of the heads-up display. This isn't part of the arcade experience, it's just a bizarre glitch. It's possibly caused by the fact that my NES is PAL European, but the game cartridge is NTSC American. I spoke to Retro USB about this and they agreed. My system is region unlocked, but other than that I have no explanation. Comparing the difficulty to the regular Castlevania, less time is given to complete each area, enemies deal more damage, and there are slightly fewer power-ups to find. Kills also earn fewer points, so gaining extra lives via a high score is less likely. However, as you may know, some arcade games can have their difficulty settings altered. This was a way for arcade owners to curb or increase challenge, which of course would impact how much money people spent playing the game. The reproduction card has this feature too. You can use dip switches on the front to change specific game challenges. A lower difficulty would mean fewer game overs and less coins spent, but too much difficulty would be discouraging and stop people from spending, so finding the sweet spot was a good skill for arcade jockeys to have. Beside the dip switches, there's a sticker which lets you know all the settings. Each can be set to either right or left. The switches provide a binary number which informs the NES which settings to load. You can change how many lives you start with, how many points will earn you an extra life, and how many coins it would cost you to play. I usually set it to free play, with the other settings on their most difficult options. One setting demands 5 coins for a single play. No thank you. There is a switch for overall difficulty as well, presumably for area time and enemy damage, but those can't be customised. In terms of gameplay, there's definitely a lot more dying. The pattern of enemies is semi-predictable, as your on-screen position determines what spawns where. However, if you memorise the stages, you can take them out very precisely. Castlevania is much like a rhythm game in this way. Missing a note in the song will throw the whole melody out of whack, but if you can get through without any mistakes, you'll feel unstoppable. Of course, the increased difficulty of Versus is designed to make you spend, but another payoff from playing this version is the pressure to master each stage. More so than the increased damage from monsters, the limited time for each area requires very tight gameplay from the player. You only get 170 seconds as opposed to the 300 in the home version. Reaching a boss with only seconds to go is very intense. Other than the time and difficulty thing though, Versus Castlevania isn't that different to the original. Yes, it is harder, but the levels are the same, the music is the same, and the power-ups are largely the same, albeit in slightly less quantity. If you know the hidden secrets, you can still power up pretty easily. I have beaten Castlevania once before, but I usually feel overwhelmed by the time I get to Area 4, Stage 11. You need a lot of stopwatches to get through here, as the enemies completely block your path otherwise. If you die once, you'll have to start over with nothing. The flea men are merciless, and even if you get through those, there are 2 bone dragons straight after. You can't screw up for a single moment. I can easily reach this point in both Versus and regular Castlevania, although it takes half the time in the home version. Playing Versus has definitely taught me a lot about the game, but this is as much torture as I can take for now. Retro USB aren't currently producing Versus Castlevania, as they're hard at work on their AVS console, which is basically an HD NES. That being said, This cost me $45 new, and considering the effort that's been put in and the quality of the cartridge, I think that's really valuable, especially when you consider that the original NES version of Castlevania could cost you up to £100 right now. I have the original on my 3DS, as it's less than a fiver on Virtual Console. If you're a big Castlevania fan, or just a fan of NES hard games in general, it goes without saying that you should check this out. Try and find an emulator where you might even be able to find a cartridge online. This is perfect if you're the kind of person who spent their whole childhood playing Castlevania and wants to play through again with an extra challenge. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.